Good afternoon. This is Jim Ray with the Road to the Autry Masters about the Masters of the American West. I am here with Billy Schenck, who is one of our beloved artists in the Masters of the American West. Billy's got a very distinctive style that a large audience of people really appreciate. Billy, welcome. Thank you for joining us here on the Road to the Autry Masters.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be a part of this.
How's the weather up there in Santa Fe?
You broke up a little bit. Say that again, please.
How's the weather up there in Santa Fe?
It's pretty fair. It's okay. Can't complain. It's actually shirt sleeve weather for a couple hours during the afternoon.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So Billy, the place that I like to start is to get a little understanding about your artistic background, your training. What processes did you follow to become a professional artist? And
well, that's kind of a long story, but I applied to different colleges when I was a senior in high school, and I was shocked to find I didn't get accepted to any of them. My grades weren't good enough. So as a last desperate move, I applied, put together a portfolio and applied to a local art school, Columbus College of Art and Design in Columbus, Ohio, and I got accepted. And that was a fairly academic, illustrational approach, which was not to my liking. And it got out. They went 2 years, and I was fine to leave Institute, which was a much more progressive school. And I did get a BFA from there. So then I went to New York City. This is I graduated in December 1969.
Wow.
And I was in New York 1 week later in January 1970. And what I was doing was pursuing people who had done the same thing before me. I had a roommate who had an older brother who had gone on to I got a master's degree in Bloomington, Indiana, and gone to New York, and he got hooked up with a gallery, and he began to get, successful. Mm-hmm. I had also met Ivan Karp, who came out to Kansas City Art Institute and had done, it was maybe 3 or 4 days of lectures, symposiums, showing slides. And he had been the director for Leo Castelli, which was the most prominent contemporary gallery in the history of the business up to that time. So that being said, I wanted to meet again with Ivan after I got to New York, got a loft, and I started painting. And oddly, I decided at that point, because of my infatuation and love affair with the spaghetti westerns by Sergio Leone, mm-hmm. I decided, okay, I have got to make Western paintings. And I didn't know where to begin. But somebody suggested to me, well, why not use, movie stills? And there were a lot of, black and white movie stills from the old Westerns. And fortunately, in New York, there were 2 different places where you could buy movie stills, in one place in Hollywood. So I quickly had to become an historian of Western films, because to go in and buy film stills from these guys, you had to know either the title of the film or who starred in it, any kind of contextual information, so they could go through their files and then show you a file of what they had. So that's what I started doing. Yeah. And since I was not a terrific draftsman at all, never have been, I started using an opaque projector to project these images, and I would just stand in front of the canvas, and I'd outline all the different shapes, and where there were no real lines to designate between light and dark, I just would invent it. But anyway, so what I had done purely by accident was invent a paint by number system that was a marriage from photorealism, which was a very hot school of painting at that time in New York. Chuck Close was kind of the grandfather of that whole movement.
Andy Warhol was out there doing soup cans.
Yes, and I was going to say, photorealism on one side and pop on the other. Yeah. And by definition, me doing a paint by number system and there were paint by number kits, from at the end of World War II. I came on to a very unique style of how to approach my subject matter. So that's how it began. And I was lucky enough that Ivan, within a year and a half, placed me with another gallery that was a friend of his. And I had my first solo show when I was 24. And it sold out before it opened, which was a huge shock to me.
Yeah.
And then I got picked up by a gallery in Brussels, Belgium, and I did a solo show there. I did 2 more shows in New York. And I had gallery affiliation in London, Zurich, Milan, Paris.
You're not even a 20-year overnight success.
Crashed. So then I moved permanently back out west, and I had a group show that I was in Scottsdale, Arizona. And after that, and this was in the winter of 1975, and I met Elaine Horowitz, and she was representing Fritz Schroeder, and she was the new voice for contemporary Western art. And my career began to take off again. So I did my first solo show with her in 1976, and we sold most of the paintings from that. And it's been an up and down ride, but altogether, it's been pretty okay for 52 years, of doing this.
Yeah, I think I think the distinctiveness and the uniqueness of your work is possibly the reason that you launched so quickly. And I've talked to a lot of artists about how their careers have slowly, step by step, gotten to one level and the next level. And very rarely do you talk to somebody that just kind of takes off like a rocket, which is kind of what your story sounds like. So
and I was going to say, the other thing to add to that was I even began to get into museum shows with my mentors, with Roy Lichtenstein, with Warhol, with Chuck Close. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, I was by then 25, and I was nobody, but I was getting into these group shows with them. And then I began to get collected by museums as early as 1973. So it was fun.
Good for you. So now you've been in the Autry for how many years? Do you recall?
I'm going to guess 10 or 11. I'm not sure.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you were here in the last couple of years of John Garrity, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
Yeah. And John's been gone for 8 years now, I think. So 10 or 11 sounds about right.
Right. Yep.
Well, that brings us to this year's Masters of the American West. Can you talk a little bit about the things that you're working on for us?
Yeah. And this did not start out to be thematic, but it ended up being that. 2 of the paintings are Native women portraits, and 2 others are cowgirl portraits. So I guess it looks like I've got a coherent theme going this year. That's not always the case. I'm not sure sometimes just what to do. Last year I had a landscape in, and that didn't go anywhere, but other paintings did. So I try to be more specific and think about it, in depth a lot more each year, just to see, about putting the right things in, in this show.
So your catalog piece is Hillsides Above Cedar Mesa. What's the story behind that work?
Well, I guess what I should do is back up and say, now that I have a huge volume of black and white movie stills, I've also been shooting my own slides for almost 50 years now. And I have other sources, that are hard copy that I take slides of, like the front covers of pulp Western magazines. But in this case, Cedar Mesa, that was from a photo shoot I did a few years back with my then studio assistant, who has some crow feet blood. But anyway, I remember I found a location that I really liked, and took the horse trailer out there. I had 3 horses. There were 2 women on horseback, and then I had a crew behind the camera, because we were changing wardrobe, we're changing blankets, saddles, all sorts of stuff. So it was, it was like a movie set, except I'm just shooting stills, instead of anything motion. I think there were 7 of us all together. And out of that, I got some pretty good material. This was a shot that I had always liked of her. This is Katie posing with, standing talking to the horse. And the cottonwood tree that's off to the left, that came from a whole nother shoot in Valley of the Gods, which is just north of Monument Valley. And I had that, and I liked the way the raking light came across that with the same light hitting Katie and one of my horses. And then I dropped in behind that photographs I had of Cedar Mesa. And this is pretty typical of how I put an image together. It can be sometimes, rarely, 1 slide. It's sometimes 3 or 4 or 6 or 8.
Composition.
So I piece it together. Yes. So I compose it that way.
Okay.
So that's how that painting came to exist.
Okay.
And then
what else?
I also just want to say the mood and the lighting is not at all what was in the original slides. That I invented.
Yeah, you completely control that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Which is unusual because most of the artists that are working on representational stuff, they're working with the light that they've got. And you've got a completely constructed world that you're working in, and you can create an angry sky there. You can create a so it's a fascinating process. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So what are some of the others? You've got a miniature that you produced for us. What was that?
I did, and that was from really didn't get to shoot much of anything during the COVID era. So I had ideas that were backed up in my head. And in October, I found a new young girl who is Inuit from Alaska. And I did a photo shoot with her. And again, I had the situation for me is I need to shoot very late in the afternoon towards dusk because I like long raking light, but I also have to wait for the weather to be right because I don't like it overcast where I got flat lighting. I don't need a lot of clouds in there to mess it all up. So we scheduled and rescheduled that shoot for 3.5 months. I mean, I had literally started that in July. And she was busy, then I couldn't do it. Then the weather was not cooperating. We had a wet summer. That was good, but it wasn't any help to me. And so finally we got to get together in October, and it's the same thing. I, went out on another location. We had just one of my horses in this case, and we had the entire wardrobe, the skirts, the blouses, the blankets, the jewelry when we used that. And then I have one other person other than Rebecca who's helping me to make clothes changing and, all that sort of stuff. So out of that photo shoot, I got the first 2 things I've done with this new model. And then the last one is another woman who is the subject matter, who is Rebecca's hairstylist. And we did a couple of photo shoots with her before COVID. And I had a slide that oh man, this thing is really good, really iconic. And then through another photo shoot, I had just gone back out to Monument Valley, and this would be for roughly the 95th time in 52 years. I go out at least twice a year. And I work with a guide sometimes. I'm getting in locations where, visitors and whites can't, normally be in without a guide, without a Navajo guide. So I got some more new material. And again, I shoot early in the morning. I meet him like an hour before sunup, and we'll shoot until, 9 or 10 o'clock, stop, take a break for lunch, and then get back together in the afternoon and shoot some more footage late in the days. And so that's how this last painting is coming together. And I'm liking it enough that under other circumstances, I wouldn't even put it on the market. I keep it.
Yeah.
So
there's some of those that they're just, we're going to save this for the estate.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's talk about your process. You've got a very unusual process. How do you
Yeah.
know when you've got a keeper?
What what I do, I have a full-time a studio assistant, I always have, and other people who are, backing me up. So when everybody's gone at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, quite often in the evenings, I'll go through carousel after carousel after carousel of these 35 millimeter slides. And I'll just start picking out, oh, this looks good. I like this rock formation. And then, oh gosh, I haven't used this figure before. I like the way the light is hitting this. And so it just builds like that. And I'll build little different piles of slides. And eventually I'll just come up with an image. It doesn't mean it's bulletproof once I've picked it. I mean, I've had paintings that, and I don't know what they're going to look like, because they're constructed. I don't know what I'm doing to change, the atmosphere, the lighting. And it's not until I get the last white gone and everything's filled in with color, do I have an idea of how successful or not this is going to be. And it's not 100%. There's definitely failures.
A lot of it,
they get tossed.
a lot of it sounds like, kind of the same process that a photo editor goes through when they're sitting there sorting through different things and trying to figure out this fits, this doesn't, this fits. And interesting question. You mentioned that you're looking at slides. I'm a fairly well-developed amateur photographer and used to love to shoot on both positive film and negative film. Everything, of course, now is digital. Are you still shooting on film, or have you transitioned over to digital?
No, I'll tell you, everybody comes in, artists and people who are interested in buying paintings and all that, and they're shocked that I'm using, 35 millimeter slide film, and then I'm using, the projectors, the Kodak carousel projectors. They quit making those in 2004. So I have, I don't know, about 15 of them. And so I rotate when they're breaking down or whatever, and we have somebody down in Albuquerque who repairs those. I used to be able to just send my film once I'd shot it, here locally and have it developed. No more. Then, I mean, all of that's disappeared. Now I have to send the film to Denver. I get it back 2 or 3 weeks later. And positive photographs, I shoot those because I have them. I shoot them into slides. And they have to go out to a guy who will change digital image if we find something on the computer, on the internet, and he'll change that to slide film for me. The reason I like slides, you go digital, it's already flat. Whatever you've shot out there, yes, you can still get the deep to space and all that, but it's already flattened. I don't want that. I want to see the light the way it was when I shot it.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not computer literate. I don't know how to do anything. Somebody would put a digital, projector in front of me, I wouldn't even begin to know what to do with it.
Yeah, well, very, very interesting. Very interesting. So, in a lot of ways, you're telling me that you've got a workflow and a process that is somewhat antiquated, but you're sticking with it because that's what works with you.
Well, Jim, when I started it, it was radical.
Yeah.
52 years ago. Sure. Photorealism as a school of thinking or a school of painting, it was just unheard of. I mean, although people had been using photographs as reference to actually make a real issue of like, oh, now I'm going to make a painting that looks like a 35 millimeter slide. That's kind of cool. But, they didn't go anywhere with it. It's just, it eventually becomes pedantic, I think. But one thing that, and I started editing and changing, immediately, even as I did use photo projected stuff. But if you'll notice in my paintings, sometimes where other artists will have information in a shadowed area, I drop my shadows almost to a pure black.
Yeah.
And that's where it looks like a photograph, because that's what photographs can do if they're underexposed. You're going to drop, all that information on the shadow side just to plain black. Well, by doing that, I'm giving you a structure to the painting. It's really adding to the composition, and I'm forcing your eye to go exactly where I want, to the lighter side of those areas, and the blacks, just hold up those areas, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if anybody that's familiar with the zone system for view cameras, which goes from all the way absolute black to all the way absolute white, you're literally manipulating the zone in each of your works. But I think the thing that I love about your work is, regardless of what your subject is, you always figure out a way to introduce the energy of lightning into it. I mean, there's just something that explodes off of the off of the image when you look at it, and that's the lightning that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about physical lightning, but I'm talking about the energy of lightning when you look at that image, and it's something that you can't bottle.
Yeah. Well, I try to turn up the volume of drama as much as I can.
Maybe that's
and
what
even though I'm using more and more subtle colors, I still know how to manipulate those to give a super punch without having to use really bright psychedelic chromatic colors. I mean, that's been a long process to figure out how to manipulate it to that, from that area over to the next area.
Well, Billy, this has been fascinating to learn a little bit more about your history and your process, and the way that you do things. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us. I hope that we'll be able to see you out in Los Angeles at the Masters in February. And
that's what we're planning.
Thanks for spending some time with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I sure appreciate it.